Welcome, Vikas. Vikas, could you hear me?
Good morning, sir. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes. Welcome to the session.
Thank you, sir. I mute for time being, sir.
Okay. Dr. Garg, you can send a reminder to Dr. Tripathi and Dr. Vaishali to join.
Yes, sir. I already sent a tender reminder to all of
Okay,
the speakers.
okay. Thank you. Dr. Tripathi, welcome to the session.
Good morning, Suji. How are you? Thank you.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Long time we haven't met.
Yes, we should. We should catch up sometime
पहले गर्मी
soon.
हो गई अब I think Delhi is flooded.
This is a tragedy. What to say? Every
Yes.
monsoon, the story is now Delhi is now becoming Mumbai, basically.
Yes. थोड़े दिनों में नोएडा वगैरह will become oceans.
Uh,
फिर पूरी फील आ जाएगी मुंबई की.
looks like.
But Noida was better. It didn't get flooded. दिल्ली
Noida
में
is
काफी
better
बुरा
planned.
हाल था.
Noida is better
Yes.
planned and far better than Gurgaon.
Yes. there was a viral photo couple of years ago, एक एम्बेसडर कार पानी में डूबी हुई थी, उसके ऊपर लिखा हुआ था गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया।
I think your voice is breaking.
मैं बोल रहा हूँ देयर वाज अ वायरल फोटो कपल ऑफ इयर्स अगो, जिसमें एक फ्लाईओवर के नीचे पानी भरा हुआ था, एक एम्बेसडर कार थी एंड उस पे लिखा था गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया।
Isha, please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. We are privileged to welcome you all today for the webinar on a topic of profound importance: humanitarian issues and border security. In our current global landscape, the intersection of border security and humanitarian considerations is more pressing than ever. As nations work to secure their borders, they are equally obliged to uphold the principles of human rights and compassion. Balancing these priorities is not only a matter of policy, but also a testament to our collective values and ethical commitments. We are especially honored to extend a warm welcome to an exceptional panel of speakers: Sir Sanjeev Sood, Sir Dhananjay Tripathi, Ma'am Vaishali Raghuvanshi, and Sir Vikas Chandra. Each of the speakers brings a wealth of knowledge and experience, promising a comprehensive and insightful discussion on this critical subject. We are positive that their contributions will help us understand the intricate balance between securing our borders and upholding humanitarian principles. We encourage everyone to actively engage in today's discussion and ask questions during the question answer round. Your participation is vital in fostering a rich and productive dialogue. Thank you all for joining us today. And once again, welcome. We are looking forward to having an enlightening and thought provoking session that will inspire meaningful actions. Thank you. Now I hand over to Ratrani.
Thank you, Yashi, for introducing the topic. I'm Rudrani Garg, and I'm delighted to be the moderator for today's important discussion. Today, we have a distinguished panel of experts who will provide us with valuable insights into the complex intersection of border security and human rights. Without further ado, may I now first invite Mr. S.K. Sood, Additional Director General of Border Security Force. Mr. Sood has a vast experience in border management and security operations. Mr. Sanjeev Krishnan Sood, who is also a retired Additional Director General of Border Security Force, has over 38 years of meritorious service and has served over all the borders of India, including along the lines of Pakistan and Bangladesh, with an extensive tenure of over 8 years along the line of control and in the sensitive region of Samba sector of Jammu and Kashmir. Mr. Sood's career is a testament to the dedication and excellence of border management and security. His deep understanding of security related issues and the role of security forces in India's security matrix is unparalleled. His insights have not only shaped border security and strategies, but have also enriched public discourse on such critical matters. Beyond his illustrious career, Mr. Sood is also an accomplished author, having penned a book titled BSF, The Eyes and Ears of India, and have contributed several chapters on border security. His expertise is frequently sought after, making him a regular participant in television debates on mainstream news channels, where he provides valuable perspectives on current security issues and political matters. Additionally, he's a regular contributor to several newspapers and columns such as The Quint, Wire, The Print, etc. In addition to his professional accomplishment, Sir has a keen interest in politics and humor. We are very privileged to have you with us, sir, today for this webinar, and we are excited to listen to your vast experiences and knowledge. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rudrani. I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Rudrani, for those kind words. Uh, uh, Before I go on to say something about what I have to talk about, I welcome the three other panelists, Dr. Dhananjay Tripathi, Dr. Vaishali, and my dear colleague in the service, Mr. Vikas. Vikas I have known for as long as I have been working in BSF for over 30 years, and he is a thorough professional, and I'm sure his contributions today will add to our practical knowledge of the borders, how the borderscape operates. Dr. Tripathi I have now known for over 5 years, and we have been talking on borders related issues. I have attended a couple of seminars along with him. We have co-authored a small paper for an international magazine on the impact of COVID on border management, and he has extremely vast knowledge about various borders of the world, and he keeps contributing through his write-ups and presentations nationally and internationally. Welcome, Dr. Tripathi. Dr. Vaishali Raghuvanshi, who teaches at BHU. I now know her for about a couple of years, and in fact, she pioneered a seminar last year at BHU, uh, which was very fruitful and added to the wealth of knowledge in the area of border management and border guarding and managing the area along the borders of India and other countries. Welcome, Dr. Raghuvanshi, to you also. Uh,
Thank you, sir.
coming back to what I have to talk about, I'll leave the theoretical aspects and wider academic aspects to the two academicians, and I'll focus on what I have experienced and what I feel about the problems of residents of border areas during my service in various parts of the country. Uh, and in that also, I'll since I've worked along the Indo-Pakistan and Indo-Bangladesh border, I'll mainly focus on the problems along these borders of India, both with Bangladesh and with Pakistan. A little bit of history. You see, these borders, the two borders with Pakistan and Bangladesh, never existed before 1947. People were living along the territory or on the territory which is Pakistan now, and on the territory which is in India now. In fact, my ancestors, my grandfather was working in Lahore, but they had properties here somewhere near Chandigarh. So it was a mixed bag. People were living somewhere, people were working somewhere else. 1947 disrupted everything. And what it did was it divided families, it divided villages. As we all know the historical background, Sir Ratcliffe, as is said, his scalpel left nothing untouched. It divided villages, it divided homes even. You can along Bangladesh border and find many houses which the bedroom is on Bangladesh side, the living room is on the Indian side. Not as lavish as we are used to seeing in the cities. Even the hutments, which may have two, and you will find the border pillars located right in the compound, or ahatas as they call it, of each houses. So the partition, what partition did, it divided families, it resulted in large scale migration, and it also confused people who were living along the borders. Suddenly, they were not allowed to visit an area which they had been visiting all along. And they were told that they needed a passport and visa to visit those places where their houses were, where their relatives were, and in fact continued to live. Uh, they suddenly found that the markets where they disposed of their produce, their agricultural produce, were no longer accessible to them. They had to find different or other markets. So this created a lot of problem during the initial periods. And in fact, if we read a book by Mr. Willem van Schendel. The book is called The Bengal Borderland Beyond State and Nation in South Asia, which is published in 2004. It goes on to state, it cites an example where an Indian was working in the government of the then East Pakistan, but traveled every day back to India to live here. But then those were easier days. The border restrictions were not that stringent. As the borders became more stringent, the regulations became more stringent, the problems of the border residents continued to rise, continued to increase. The borders ruined the economy of the border area. A person who probably had a कद्दू को अंग्रेजी में क्या बोलते हैं, I don't know, pumpkin. So if he had produced a pumpkin in his farm, he could dispose it off next door or in the village heart, in the next village. But the borders created a restriction. He probably couldn't have taken it back to a market located at some distance in the depth, which would be administratively and logistically would have been very difficult for him. So this ruined the economy of the border area to a great extent. The intermixed economy, they had to find different markets. So the open markets, the not the market, the open borders couldn't totally prevent the to and fro movement of men. And this is apparent from the fact that in the initial years, and in fact it still continues, that many residents of border areas, their daughters are married across the border in Bangladesh. This is particularly so along the Indo-Bangladesh border, and also uh, along the Gujarat border, with the borders along the Gujarat state of India with Pakistan, where many people still get their daughters or sons married across the border. Perhaps now they do it by obtaining visa and passports. Earlier they used to do it without that. So all this has stopped. And but then the open borders continued to see to and fro movement of goods, and the restrictions imposed on transportation of goods uh, couldn't prevent because the borders were open. The strength or the presence of border guarding forces was not much in those areas, and therefore it continued. In fact, the entire protein requirement of what is now Bangladesh was dependent on the cattle in the eastern parts of the then Akhand Bharat or India, which consisted of both Pakistan and Bangladesh. So the cattle smuggling continued, the supply of essential goods, medicines continued because Eastern Pakistan and later Bangladesh didn't have a very developed economy. It still doesn't, but in any case, the things have improved to a great extent by now. So this cattle smuggling uh, still continues in spite of the fact that the fence has been uh, created, and this is apparently due to the demand and supply situation. There is demand in Bangladesh, there is additional supply in India, and like the water flows from higher ground to the lower ground, the cattle also continues to flow from India to Bangladesh, even though a lot of restrictions were imposed by firstly construction of fence, and now by some very strict measures taken by the border guarding forces. In fact, if we get into the data of last 5 7 years, we will find that the cattle smuggling has reduced by a factor of uh, 3/4. It is not even 1/4 of what it used to be 10 years ago. So the fencing, as I said, uh, became necessary because of the situation in Punjab, and the fencing, the success of fencing in controlling Punjab, which is one of the major factor in controlling militancy in Punjab, resulted in lot of problems, and it also resulted in adapting the same methodology to guard the borders of India with Bangladesh. So Bangladesh border is now entirely fenced. Pakistan border is entirely fenced. Bangladesh border, except for about uh, one fourth. I mean, 1/4 is a large number because 4,000 kilometers of Bangladesh border, 1/4 is about 1,000 kilometers of the border with Bangladesh cannot be fenced because of the riverine nature. So these gaps continue to be exploited by the border criminals and smugglers who, because of either lack of focus on developing these remote areas or because of the resource constraint, because the resources were firstly deployed in the interior, and the number of or rather the focus on borders has shifted only now. So there were hardly any infrastructure along the border which could provide them with useful employment and therefore a proper income, and therefore these people continued to indulge in border crimes, and they still continue to indulge in those because we still have not been able to focus completely on improving infrastructure in these areas, in improving the skills of the border residents in these areas to make them employable elsewhere. So these people continue to uh, sort of indulge in border crime because, after all, they have to earn their livelihood. And this brings them into a conflict with the border guarding forces, BSF in the case of Pakistan and Bangladesh, and SSB in case of Nepal and Bhutan, and so on and so forth. So uh, since the conflict arises, and one of the important tasks of the border guarding force like BSF is to prevent trans-border crimes and to prevent smuggling. So they, while in carrying out this operation, in carrying out these duties, they are compelled to use force at times because uh, the border residents, since it is a matter of their livelihood, they become violent, and this violence then gets when it gets uh, when these violent border criminals get confronted by BSF patrols in those areas, they get injuries, they get there are deaths at times, and this invites human rights issues, human right uh, agencies or human right groups working in those areas come into play, and then there are several inquiries and all. To prevent this, the BSF, especially in the eastern region, has now adopted for last about 7 8 years has now adopted uh, something called less lethal strategy, where there is less focus on using conventional firearms. We are instead using pump action guns and chili grenades and other stun grenades, etc., so that uh, injuries and deaths are reduced. And in fact, this has uh, shown good results. The adoption of this policy has shown better results. Now, as I said, the fence came up as a result of Punjab situation in late 80s, early 90s on the western borders, and in late 90s, early 2000 on the eastern borders. The fence itself has caused several inconveniences to the border residents. They are the security implications necessitate lot of restrictions on movement of border population in those areas. I hope I'm not exceeding my time limit. Uh, in those areas, uh, unlike in the interiors where a farmer goes to his land early in the morning, the border residents cannot go there. They have to cross through a gate where they are frisked, where they are searched, to ensure that no contraband is taken across or no contraband is brought across. There are restrictions on their coming back. They cannot work till late in their farmlands. So these restrictions also cause a lot of problems to the border population. Then on the eastern borders, there are several villages which are located ahead of the fence. Ahead of the fence meaning between the fence and the international border with Bangladesh. Uh, Due to paucity of land in those areas, which is due to much higher population density in those areas, these villagers cannot be shifted backward uh, on the home side of the fence, unlike on the west, where no village is located across the fence. So there is a problem of providing security to these border villagers, and also ensuring that they do not get involved in uh, trans-border crimes. Human rights angles I have already mentioned. Less lethal strategy I have already mentioned, and therefore the government must focus on improving the infrastructure in these border areas, for which the government has started something called Border Area Development Program, which uh, started sometimes in uh, in mid 90s, uh, which this program is aimed at the border areas, and the funds are allotted directly to the state government, with certain percentage being allotted to the border guarding force of the area and certain other percentage being expended on the aid and advice of the border guarding force of that India. In fact, for better implementation of border area development program, the civil agencies can use the extent and reach of the border guarding forces to prepare plans. You see, in a remote area, it is the lone sentry of BSF or other border guarding agency, which is the sole representative of government authority in that area. And these villagers come to them for venting out their problems or projecting their problems. And therefore, BSF has a lot of potential to assist the civic authorities in improving the lives of the border residents. And then the other program is the civic action program, where the funds are directly allotted to the border guarding forces. These funds are meant to be utilized by these forces for enhancing the skills and also creating some small infrastructure which cannot be undertaken under the BADP for mutual benefit of the security forces and also the local residents. So these two funds collectively will go a long way in enhancing the lives of the border residents, in inculcating skills amongst them to make them employable outside. And this is what the government must focus on to wean them away from the border crime and thereby improve security scenario in the border regions. I would be amiss if I don't talk about the human aspects of the border guards. You see, in the civil circles, it is it is rarely discussed the circumstances under which the border guards operate, the BSF operates, or other border guarding forces operate is not a topic of discussion. Uh, the borderman faces lot of problems because of lack of family life, lack of accommodation, lack I mean to some to state in brief, uh, because of lack of proper work life balance, they face a lot of problems which causes stress, which is the result of heavy attrition, both by way of voluntary retirements as well as the incidents of fratricide and suicide in the border guarding forces. Induction of women, while it has helped the border guarding forces and it has also helped the local uh, village women folk, since they also used to cross over cross the fence to go across to their fields. So it has helped them to a great extent. But at the same time, it also has necessitated that the bordermen or the border or the security forces like ours, which are mainly male dominated, realize the importance of gender sensitivity, which uh, which is something that must be included in the training curriculum, as well as when the women folk are deployed along with their men colleague on the borders. Uh, I will end here, but I'll recommend, if those who want to write down can note down, please go through a book called A Thousand Cuts by Dr. Shahana Ghosh. Ghosh. She talks about human aspects. She has done a lot of research by staying amongst the villagers in the border region, and there are a lot of insights about their problems and about the problems of the border security force also. Please do, if you can get hold of this book, please do read it. It gives a lot of insight on this issue. And I cannot hold back the temptation of recommending that my book on BSF, the BSF Eyes and Ears of India, people may like to procure and read to know about the aspects of border guarding along the borders that BSF mans. Thank you so much for the patient hearing. I am open to question answers.
May I request the participants to kindly drop your questions, or you may also unmute yourself and ask the question directly to Sir.
Good morning, sir. I hope I'm audible.
I couldn't get your name.
Yes, sir. I'm Harshita. I hope I'm audible.
Oh, yeah, you're audible. Huh?
Hi. Thank you so much, sir, firstly, for enlightening us on this subject. You mentioned a lot about the Indo-Bangladeshi border, and I wanted to ask, what role does international cooperation and coordination, especially between, suppose, bilateral countries in this situation, India and Bangladesh, or international organizations, what role do these bilateral negotiations play in addressing human trafficking and smuggling networks? And what are the main trafficking routes that you've identified in India?
You see, insofar as cooperation with the counterpart is concerned, uh, at the local level, there is a lot of cooperation which has also been institutionalized by something called Coordinated Border Management Plan signed between the DGs of two countries in 2011. So, uh, through this plan, both these forces, the Bangladesh border guards and BSF, coordinate with each other. They identify the sensitiveness of a particular place from the point of view of border crimes. I mean, insofar as BSF is concerned, I would identify the areas considered sensitive by me. In case of Bangladesh, they identify the areas considered sensitive. And then uh, the deployment pattern for domination of the actually the BOPs may not change, but the deployment pattern through patrols and ambushes keeps getting altered according to the identification of the sensitiveness of particular areas. Uh, we also carry out a lot of coordination uh, through coordinated patrols and with the gradual progression from the border guarding towards integrated border management. Or we are now seeing increased cooperation between the border guarding forces as well as other agencies working on the border. You see, if you look into the report of the group of ministers after the Kargil episode, you will find that they said border management cannot be a sole agency function, which used to be the thought process till then. They said all agencies working along the border, be the security forces, be the civil administration, be it intelligence agencies, and so on and so forth, have a stake in improving the border management. So a lot of coordination between these agencies is now being undertaken. There are state level coordination committees. The border guarding forces have been designated as the lead intelligence agencies for the areas for the border they man. So regular meetings are conducted there, and then at local level there is a lot of coordination between. Uh, then the other part of the question was that which are the areas identified. You see, The entire border, in fact, is sensitive. The riverine areas, especially the Brahmaputra area, the area south of the landmass of West Bengal, that is the Bay of Bengal area, and other riverine areas are the most sensitive because they cannot be fenced, they cannot be lit, and therefore we have got a water wing deployed there. And lot of areas in Assam, especially in Silchar sector, which is totally riverine, is identified as sensitive insofar as border crimes are concerned. Uh, a small portion of the border in Kaliaganj in Malda district is known for extensive uh, infiltration of fake Indian national currency. And the latest is that the border along Mizoram is being utilized. Those are open borders in the sense that those are heavily forested, and uh, the entire area cannot be kept under total surveillance. So a lot of party drug called yaba is also being smuggled from there. I hope it answers your question, Harshita.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for that.
Is there any other question? If not, then we can proceed to the next speaker. I think that there are no further questions. So, on that note, sir, thank you so much for your speech. In fact, your speech took me back to the fact that I belong from the Northeast and I myself have been witness to all the open borders. In fact, it was the very first time I went to Jammu and Kashmir and I saw fencing. This topic of fencing has always been a big interest for me, and at the same time, the way border security forces have often have to use the humanitarian consideration, such as what you mentioned, the use of non-lethal technology, only to consider the humanitarian aspects. And also, somebody coming from the Northeast, have myself witnessed how underdeveloped these areas are. I thank you so much for your service in this force for such a long time and for keeping our borders safe. And really hoping for the best, specifically after border security force has now become gender inclusive. Thank you once again for your experience and as well as for your insights. And it has totally enriched us with a lot of new ideas and a lot of new thoughts to work on. Thank you so much again. Moving on to the
Thank you
next
very much.
speaker. Moving on to the next speaker, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker for the webinar, Dr. Dhananjay Tripathi, sir. Dr. Tripathi is the chairperson and the associate professor at the Department of International Relations, South Asian University. His research interests include regional integration process in Europe and South Asia, South Asian politics, border studies, and international political economy. Dr. Tripathi has an impressive array of publications to his name. His recent works includes editing the books Reimagining Border Studies in South Asia in 2020 and South Asia Boundaries, Borders and Beyond in 2022, as well as authoring Development Role of European Union in South Asia in 2011. Sir has also contributed to the edited volumes and published in numerous peer-reviewed journals such as the Journal of Borderland Studies, Economic and Political Weekly, and the International Studies. In addition to his scholarly contributions, Dr. Tripathi serves as the editorial board of several prestigious international journals, including the Journals of Borderland Studies, Alternatives, Global, Local, and Political,
It's fine,
Studios.
Rajali. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for uh, a generous introduction. Uh, Let me come to the my topic that has been assigned to me by the organizers. And before I start, I I'm really fortunate to be a part of such a panel with person like uh, Sanjeev Sudji, who has a vast experience of Indian borders. Practically, he has managed it for so many years in a leadership role. Vikas Chandraji is also has a very eminent and very first-hand information of Indian borders. Vaishali is a young scholar and she has done some remarkable work, and I'm very hopeful that in future we'll see more work from her. So I am somewhere in between, someone who is trying to learn, someone who's trying to engage with Indian borders. Uh, my entry to the borders basically comes from my own discipline, and that is international relations. In international relations, borders are are given. For a student of international relations, borders means security, territoriality. Uh, it's something which we look from the Westphalian understanding of the nation state. And anyone who like to challenge the borders, theoretically or otherwise, is being seen as someone either exception, or we have some other names. I don't want to use it in this webinar, but borders in our discipline is mainly security. So I thanks the organizers, firstly, for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this wonderful, excellent panel, and also for organizing an event that looks into border and human security and human rights and human values. So thank you. So as I said, that my entry into the borders is primarily from my discipline, and you know, having a PhD in European studies, one thing, and that always fascinated me throughout my whatever academic life I have till now, is the integration of Europe and least integration of South Asia. Like these two things are very contradictory of in my own academic life. The integration of Europe has a lot to do with the management of borders, the way they have managed their borders so excellently, despite having a lot of problems between them. And we know that the two world wars was fought in Europe. The idea of Westphalian nation state actually emerges from Europe. Most of the theoretical and practical understanding of the territoriality, nations, borders actually come from Europe. And even then, despite so much of divisions, etc., I just mentioned, they have managed it so well. And that's really contributed to the European integration process. Now, coming to South Asia, what really makes South Asia a very difficult region when it comes to integration is also has a lot to do. I'm not saying that only with borders, but has a lot to do with the borders. If you look at South Asia, uh, there are hard borders, there are soft borders. Hard borders are those borders where easy movement is not permitted. It's fenced, it's highly securitized, it's volatile. And soft borders are like between India, Bhutan, and India, Nepal. But if somebody have followed the South Asian borders in a very anxious way or very minutely, they would have noticed that even between India and Nepal, now there are issues related to the borders. It's no longer means no longer a case that there are this open, very you know uh, it's an open border, has nothing to do with problems, technical debates, contestation. All of it is now a reality also for India Nepal border. India Bhutan definitely is still with very less contestation, but we know, and this is on fact, that despite this cordial relation, we have not succeeded in having a BBIN vehicle agreement getting through. There are problems with it, and the problems also relate with the border management. So in South Asia is a region, I'm not actually pointing out about India, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh border. These are very critical and very securitized border. I'm talking of the borders that we really feel is very open. Here also the question of security comes into play. Between India and Sri Lanka, the maritime borders that we talks about, also the fisherman issue, and between India and Maldives, we have recently witnesses within the maritime borders there are issues emerging. So we live in a region which has so much of border anxiety, which has so much of security, compulsions, that makes our understanding about borders that it's only about security. So I thanks Borderman for organizing an event that also talks beyond security. It's about human rights. It's about other things. And I'm being asked to discuss about refugees, uh, and asylum seekers, and border security. You know, who are the refugees? First of all, nobody like to get displaced from their roots. There are psychological, sociological studies that really points out that individual human beings really like to be attached with their roots. All of us are displaced from our roots for various reasons: socioeconomic, political, and sometimes the refugees are forced to leave their place. They are forced by various factors, maybe war, conflict, ethnic tensions, violence, and they are forced to leave their place, and that is how they become refugees. One very important thing in the idea of the nation state is citizenship. It's a very prominent thing. you know the way we imagine international relation, and not even international, even the political science, the first and the fundamental thing is nation state, the society, and your citizenship is the most important identity that we carry all over the world. If you are not, if you do not have a proper defined citizenship, your life is very problematic, because then you belongs to nowhere. And if you don't belongs to anywhere, your rights, your security, everything is in question. So refugees, in a way, is a very difficult part of somebody's life. There are refugees, and who knows better than the South Asians about the refugees? We have seen uh, recently, in a recent memory, when we talked about refugees, European refugee crisis comes first to the mind. Some, I think, 6 7 years back, we have seen that how people have died in Mediterranean trying to cross from West Asia, from Turkey to Europe. And what was the reason? It is not that they wanted to go to Europe because Europe is more rich, for better life, etc. There may be elements like that as well, but majority wanted to go because the entire region of West Asia got destabilized. Syria, we know the conflict in Syria, the conflict in Iraq, and in Lebanon, and in most of this region, what we have seen, that the government got destabilized, the country got bombings, etc., etc. And there were reasons to believe that European powers were mostly involved in destabilizing these regions. People don't had the surety that they are going to live for another day, and that is why they fled from their own country, wanted to go to Europe, because Europe was nearest to this region, was safest for them, where there are certain guarantees, and people believe that European Union or Europe is more humane, is a more civilian. But what we have seen, that the effort that has been put forth by the European Union to stop these refugees, including giving a lot of foreign aid to Turkey to in fact build a wall, not to allow these refugees to come to Europe. And what they said, that this is the help to the refugees, but in a way it was to ensure that these refugees do not cross Turkey and come to the European Union. So, even when it comes to most humane civilian powers like Europe, when it comes to refugees, they are not very open to the idea, except for some countries. Of course, Germany is one, but other countries are not very open to the ideas of accepting refugees. As I said, that the moment you become refugees, your national identity get into question. And if your citizenship get into question, then you are in a problematic state. Wherever you go, if you have a citizenship, defined citizenship, if you have a valid passport, legally admitted, you are good. But the moment your nationality, your identity, your passport, your legality is questioned, you are vulnerable. So this is exactly what happened there. If you look at some of the figures, this is very interesting. Almost like 117 million people are are refugees all over the world, and this is a very big figure. In this, 68.3 million people are internally displaced, means within the country, and this is what we have seen in South Asia a lot. 37.3 millions are legally known as refugees. The exact figure are not there, but these are figures that are through data that are available to the World Refugee Institute. Uh, then there are asylum seekers, almost like 7 million. And then there are some 5 to 6 million people who are in requirement of international protection. That means these people are very vulnerable. They wanted to move to some other safe places, but they are not being able to move for variety of reasons. Maybe conflict, ethnic violence, ethnic cleansing, so many things goes on all over the world. Now coming to the South Asia, and why refugee issue is such an important issue for South Asia that we generally ignore in our border studies discussions. Uh, One thing to begin with, South Asia is a home of 2.5 million refugees, and this is on record. This is the data that we have. And as I said, there are so many other refugees. We don't have the data, but there are 2.5 million refugees who are right now in South Asia in different countries. Uh, Second thing, South Asia, we conveniently forget the fact that South Asia is not merely a post-colonial, it's a post-partition region. And when I say post-partition region, refugee makes our part of life in South Asia. And let me go back to 1951, after 1947, when there was the data was collected. Almost it was said that 14 million people were displaced during India-Pakistan partition. So the much of India, Pakistan that we see today, there are 14 million displaced people in this part, you know. And now there are a number of movies and even Netflix series on this. But despite all of it, we forget the fact that refugees are not, considered in a very good way in the whole of the South Asia. But if you go back with the celebration of independence, there was another thing attached, and that was partition, and with partition, refugees. And I'm not actually getting into the other aspect of it, that these refugee movement was not very pleasant. There was huge violence involved, bloodshed, and there are very catastrophic situation that was there at that point of a time. So many people have lost their life. I'm not getting into the details of that, but even the 14 million refugees itself speak that how difficult it was. It was not a pleasant partition, it was a difficult partition. And some of these partition narratives or partition memories still plays out between India Pakistan relations. We have not been able to overcome the partition. And interestingly, in this part of the world, nobody have said like who was responsible, or are we really feeling sorry for this kind of a catastrophic impact of partition that happened on the people's life. you know I'm glad that now we have certain things like partition museums, etc. But even now there's a lot that needs to be done, because partition also plays a very vital role between India Pakistan relation till date. Now coming to the second part of refugee movement, a huge refugee movement that happened in 1971. Almost 10 million people were displaced. And again, this is the point of contestation between India and Bangladesh. So whatever we say that we have managed to have a very excellent relation with Bangladesh nowadays. The regime is very friendly, but in the political circles, we always talk about illegal immigrant coming from Bangladesh. We have used, I don't want to use those words here, but we know the politicians have used certain words. And and interestingly, this was one region at one point of a time. Before 1947, there was nothing like Pakistan or Bangladesh. It was the entire one region. But the way the partition played out, the displacement, the refugees, it plays out in the relation, in the bilateral relation, and also in the domestic politics. So whatever we say in the terms of having excellent relation with Bangladesh, any day this refugee questions will come, illegal immigrant question will come, and it has a potential to spoil many of the good things that is developing between India and Bangladesh. And 10 million people were displaced. 10 million people were displaced in 1971. You know, and and it's still a point of contestation. It is still a point of contestation between India and Bangladesh. Now let me come to the third aspect. I know I don't have much time left, but I'll try to conclude it in another 2 3 minutes. Then we come to the third aspect, and where there is a potential danger in South Asia, and it is about the climate refugees in South Asia. Professor Sanjay Chaturvedi has done some remarkable work, even in IPCC report. There's a discussion on climate refugees, and 14 million in 1951, 10 million in 1971. The expectation or the calculation is that nearly 40 million, if I add 14 and 10, it will become 24. If I add some other, like couple of more millions, it might become 30, 35. But it is, as per the report, 40 million people in South Asia may be forced to be displaced because of the climate uncertainties. Just before the beginning of this discussion, Sanjuji was talking about the Delhi floods. In one night, entire Delhi was flooded. Now, uh, people who are, and the class factors plays out here. We have seen that in the Delhi flood, even the Lutean Delhi is facing this burnt. It's no more the class. The class is definitely, they have been more affected. Some are resourceful who can deal with it. Some are not that resourceful. Their livelihood, their earnings may get destroyed. We have a memory of the last year's Delhi flood. All of it is going to play out a huge role in the refugee movements. And by 2050, and we are in 2024, that means in next 2 decades or so, 40 million people in South Asia are going to be displaced. Now, whatever you do with the border security, nobody talks about, when we talk about border security, Americans have one of the best border securities, but even then the Mexicans comes in. Trump talked about the border wall. Europeans say about border security, they have a different kind of surveillances, etc., etc. History has proved that you have to manage the borders. Merely hard security apparatuses cannot be a complete deterrence for the refugee movements. People will come in. If their livelihood, if their life is under threat, they will try to take all kind of risk. And we have seen that Americans have faked whatever the talks in terms of highly securitized border security between America and Mexico, we know that people comes in. It's a known fact. It's a known fact. It's a known fact that in whatever you say, people comes in Europe. It has also been proved, at least it was a tragic accident. It was a tragic moment. It was a terrorism that happened in Israel. But even in Israel, despite all the security apparatuses, intelligence, etc., there were attacks. So one thing is about security. We need security, but also the management. So the South Asian states have to prepare themselves for the climate refugees. And if you have to prepare yourself for the climate refugees, it requires two-pronged strategy. One is definitely the border management. How are you going to manage your border? How are you going to allow people? What kind of a mechanism you need? But the second most important thing, and the big question is, and Sanjuji has already spoken, Vikasji will speak, and the big question is, are we have adequate infrastructure to deal border infrastructure to deal with this kind of a situation, or do we need much upgradation? Second is, are we thinking of the climate change issue seriously? Because even as I said that howsoever you manage your borders, you have to deal with the symptom. You have to deal with the real issues. And if you remain like ignorant about it, nobody can save us. It's going to be a huge displacement that is going to take place. Tamil refugees, we know about it. I don't want to get into many of the critical questions because then I don't have that much of time to explain it properly. But there are refugees in all over South Asia, whether we like it or dislike it or whatever. But Rohingya crisis. There are more than 1 million Rohingyas in Bangladesh. There are Rohingyas in India as well. So these are critical questions. One is definitely the border security. Second is how are we going to manage? And the climate question has to be dealt with all the South Asian countries. If glaciers are going to melt in Nepal, it is going to create havoc in Bangladesh. If there will be a havoc in Bangladesh, if the livelihood is getting threatened, then refugees will move from Bangladesh to some country. That's a fact. And nobody can say they are going to stop it. Now let me come to the last and very important thing, and that is linked with the climate refugees issue. And I will stop here uh, with this point, that let us not forget COVID pandemic and the lockdown. When there was a lockdown, you know, we don't have a numbers, but now we have movies and documentaries which shows that so many people got internally displaced. We said that borders are locked. We said that everyone, nobody is allowed to move, but people have walked back 1,000 kilometers from metros to their homes. And this is the reality that we have seen by our own eyes in India. All management have failed. If there's a huge, you know, if there are like 5,000 people tomorrow, if they start from one country and assemble at the border, innocent people with their kids, with their families, with their wife, with their belongings, you cannot kill them. That's a reality. It is a real fact. Whether you fence it or whatever, if 10,000 people comes to your somebody's border, you have to deal with it. That's a question. That's a reality. And we have seen in pandemic that had happened. You know, despite lockdown, despite so many arrangement, etc., etc., we have seen huge displacement in the nation. And that displacement, why? Because if you do not have resources, if you do not have economic security, if your livelihood is under question, you will move. You will move for a secure, economically secure, psychologically secure, emotionally secure places, and nobody can able to stop you. That's a reality of the day. So let me close it here. We have a lot to think about refugees. We have a lot to think in the South Asian context, and we have a lot to think about the borders, going beyond the security prism, going beyond uh, the merely, conventional understanding of border management. We need new understanding about the border management, and border has to be managed. Lastly, I'm not saying that we are going to enter into a post-Westphalian world. There are scholars who believe it. I still believe that Westphalian system is going to be there for many, many, many more years to come. And if it's going to be there, we have to manage our border in a better way, in a more humane way, in a more, emotional, emotive considerations has to be given space in our border management. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I now request the participants to drop their questions? You may also unmute yourself and ask the question directly to the speaker.
Good morning, sir. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you
All
are.
right. Thank you so much, sir, for that speech. Considering all of the upheaval surrounding the migrant crisis in the European Union, your intake was particularly relevant for contemporary times. My question would be historically, a lot of attention has been paid to the EU migrant crisis. However, you did mention in your narrative that South Asia has always had very porous borders. And considering that, what role do you think regional cooperation can play in addressing refugee issues in South Asia? And what is India's role in it as an emerging power in the region itself?
See, very good question. I think India has a very important role to play. First of all, as I said, that one thing, that nowadays a lot of people are coming to India for a variety of reasons from the neighboring countries. One is the health, definitely. The health, what we call it as health tourism now. But even for the education, India is developing as a big educational hub within the region. And there are, the government always says that we wanted to emerge as a knowledge power, but we don't give visas so often to students who wanted to come in India for their education. So I think there is a need for more easy visa regimes within South Asia. If somebody wanted to come for some professional work, we talk a lot about Bangladeshis in India. We don't talk at all about how many Indians are working in Bangladesh. There are many Indians who are working in different sectors in Bangladesh. So easy visa regimes is definitely going to add to the economies of South Asian countries. It's not going to create any kind of trouble. We have to understand this. Every part of the world have realized this, between Canada, US, between many other countries. Of course, you have problems with Pakistan, but not problem with many other countries in the region. And some kind of a, that is through a regional cooperation. You have to devise certain mechanism to make the travel within South Asia more easier for every categories of people. It's not about like high professionals, and unskilled laborers also want better jobs, better opportunities, and if there are opportunities, let them come in. So that's the one thing. Second thing, which is actually creating a lot of trouble, and I don't have an answer for this. I think South Asia is also a very highly populated region. So sometimes the refugees here, they are viewed in a different ways, in a very economic ways, and that is why there are, a lot of anxiety, I would say, a lot of uncertainties on allowing the refugees or allowing people to come in for economic purposes. But how long in Southeast Asia we have seen that the labor movement has been allowed after a lot of, after some initial cooperation in European Union, in America also there are certain provisions. So South Asian countries have to think about it, about this kind of a movement, if about easy movement across South Asia. And India has a vital role to play, because most of these people, because India is growing fast. India is the most important economies of, or I can say the most important economy of the region. You know, most important infrastructure in the region. So people will definitely come to India, and people love to come to India. So India has to devise certain mechanism in order to deal with this kind of a situation. And the third and the last point, as I said, that whether we like it or not, refugee thinking has to start from New Delhi. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your enlightening answer, sir.
Is there any other question?
Thank you, Rudrani.
Thank you so much, sir, for your enlightening speech. You covered not just about the trauma of memory politics that is still there, till date, it has been a big peril for all of South Asian countries. And at the same time, you also covered the very fact that at this point when we are very vulnerable for climate change, that is the time when we are all erecting our hard borders, and at the same time the concept of us versus them has become so prevalent. Definitely there are many opportunities in and across South Asia, but at the same time population in itself is a big burden. I would rather like to end on this note that hope that at one point we all South Asians learn that underneath every skin color runs the same color of blood, that is red, the color that symbolizes love and not hatred. With this note, I would love to move to the next speaker. We have with us Dr. Vaishali Raghuvanshi. Dr. Raghuvanshi is an assistant professor of political science at Banaras Hindu University. Her research is understanding the South Asian mental borders, popular culture and world politics, and peace and conflict studies. Dr. Raghuvanshi's academic journey is marked by prestigious accolades, including the Jawaharlal Nehru Fellowship and a doctoral fellowship by the Indian Council of Social Science Research. Since 2014, Ma'am has been an active member of International Studies Association, presenting her groundbreaking research at esteemed conferences across the globe, right from San Francisco to Toronto to Singapore, Dhaka, and Kathmandu.
Thank
Her
you,
influence.
Rudhani. I think the introduction is available on the website. People can refer to it. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much to the organizing committee for putting up this panel on the humanitarian aspect of the border security. Let me begin by telling you all how privileged I feel today because I share this panel with my supervisor, Dr. Munjit Tripathi. He has been the pillar of strength and the mentor to guide me to the border studies and international relations. So this is a matter of privilege for me. And I also thank Mr. S.K. Sood and Vikas Chandra sir. I can see both of them. And Mr. Sood has been part of the very efficient panel at the third border studies conference which has been held at the Banaras Hindu University. And there were many prominent scholars who have spent their valuable time at the conference to share their thoughts on the areas pertaining to the border studies in nature and the interdisciplinarity of the border studies discipline has attracted me in particular because I was a scholar who was studying popular culture and the idea of the other, locating that through the movies in international relations, and slowly and gradually it took my interest to understand how this idea of creating the other, us versus them, is also can also be located through the cartographic lines. I would start with some of the critical questions which Dr. Tripathi has highlighted here. Basically, the idea of how climate is going to negotiate the boundaries in South Asia and all across the world. That is something which scholars like us and many more generations, which is going to join the fleet of the border studies scholars, have to understand. Certainly, this is something which we have to think upon because it is also incorporating what is the effect of the border on the people. And I have been a student of border studies who has always been interested in studying the bottom up perspective, especially the people's perspective, the idea of perception, the idea of narratives, the idea of how people are going to get affected with this particular policy recommendation on the border security. And the word humanitarian itself, which is today's highlight, speaks about the person involved or connected with improving people's life and reducing suffering. So even I connect the idea of climate to the humanitarian. We must not leave this to the policymakers, to the statesmen to decide and to impress from top to bottom. Rather, there should be a prominent contribution from the bottom to top itself. Now, when we connect the word humanitarian to the border security, it depicts the dilemma which scholars of international relations study as a security paradox. And that security paradox is about state security versus human security. The idea of securitization itself puts the state at the higher pedestal. And it states that it is the state which commands the security of the people, and the human rights can be easily compromised on the behest of the idea of a strong state, a securitized state in South Asia. Now, state security certainly is a structuralist construct, which is about the structural understanding of international relations. And it talks about the boundaries which draws and which gives this idea to the people that this is us and that is them. And hence it contributes to the understanding or to the narrative of us versus them. Again, the phenomena of human security compels scholars like us to think beyond the statist perspective and to go beyond the idea, the policy, the narratives which are defined in a very statist manner. So here I am situating in this light this entire discussion in the light of the humanitarian aspect of the border securities in South Asia. And when I talk about this, let me shed some light on the present system in South Asia. The present system of South Asia is basically the state system. As Dr. Tripathi has highlighted, that we are still in the Westphalian order. And we are immersed in the statist system, which has been superimposed by the West to the South Asia. We know that there has been the two great partitions of the subcontinent, and that has emanated the region of South Asia. And that partition has created three prominent states: India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. And these three prominent borders have shared the bitter history, and the current separation is an outcome of the historical construct, which has given rise to the very strong and very strict understanding of the territorial integrity. It has also created the lack of mutual confidence at the present. and has raised the security concerns. At the same time, it has also disturbed the existence of the thousands of the people who are living across the South Asian borders. The perception of the lines of hatred, disunity, informal connections, which has been the outcome of the securitized and militarized lines and heavy paramilitary presence, communal discord, humanitarian crisis, human rights abuses, and still we see informal cooperation. I have spoken about historical construct and all the problems emanating from there, but yet I'm speaking of informal cooperation. I will define this further. Borders are basically the site, which is to understand the idea of inclusion and exclusion. It has served the purpose of demarcating the inside from the outside, sovereignty from anarchy, and the singular from the pluralistic space. They have constructed what basically Nira you will term as the space of agency, the mode of participation in which we, the people, act as a citizen in the multi layered polities to which we belong. So, borders are not just lines, they are zones that situate the gray areas where the jurisdiction of one state ends and other states begin. They are the common ground of two or more states that share them and also interpret its meaning in a very different way and translate it to their own citizens for identifying the national narrative by creating the idea of the other. Border studies has been considered as the most significant interdisciplinary field of inquiry in the social sciences. And the epistemology and the ontology of the border studies have gone through a drastic transformation in the past century. Initially, it has started with the study of spatial dimensions. And now, what we witness, now, what we study is about social, cultural, economic, and political dimensions relating to the border studies. Now, the postmodernism has also brought an aesthetic and cultural turn in border studies. And the border studies has shifted its focus from where to how of the borders. Now, a very renowned scholar, Paula Banerjee, she states that in South Asia, borders and boundaries have affected every day millions of lives. And South Asian borders are agents of active politics. In this region, we define this as cartographic anxiety, which has been the outcome of superimposition of the Westphalian order, or we can say British colonialism. There are multiple implications of this cartographic anxiety, which ranges from the security paradox to the process of othering, as I have been reiterating from the beginning. Now, question about whose border it is and how cartographic lines have shaped the lives of people living at the frontiers and how memories participate in the process of othering have been probed by many, especially to name few, Dr. Tripathi, uh, very renowned female scholar Paula Banerjee, Professor Sanjay Chaturvedi, and Professor Krishna. They all have probed this entire understanding. If we have to understand the narratives or the perspectives which emanates from people, we have to first understand three important borders, as I had stated, which has been the outcome of the partition of the subcontinent: India Pakistan border, India Bangladesh border, and India Nepal border. Now, to begin with India Pakistan border, we know that it extends across 2065 miles, and there are several issues which can be traced along these borders, especially LOC, line of control in Jammu, international border in Punjab, and the desert areas of Rajasthan and Gujarat. Let me highlight the first and very important issue, which is what is the impact of this conflict, the border dispute between India and Pakistan, on the lives of the civilian. During my PhD times, I decided to visit Wagha Atari border. Many of you must have visited that area. And I was in the village, Atari village, where I witnessed that the farmers were given ID cards to do farming. Now there are bureaucratic hurdles involved in that entire process. Villagers have to obtain the ID cards to do the farming at the borderlands. There's a fencing, and that fencing will have the electric current going through. Now, here, my imagination, I mean, the parallel study which I have in my mind is of the European borders. And I do not see such kind of securitization, such kind of strict borders in Europe. Definitely, there is a role of historical construct. There is a role of idea of a state. There is a role of many other things which have resulted into the present situation at the Atari village today. Now, it is not just about the civilian lives. It is also about the second point, which is cross-border terrorism. Cross-border terrorism has not. Now, these heightened security measures and military activities has caused displacement to the people living across the border areas. There are temporary shelters and camps which has been brought up after the partition to lead the life in those areas. This definitely results into this definitely impacts the humanitarian concerns. Let's take the example of Keren Valley. I'm sure Vikas sir and Sood sir must be knowing about it. It lies on the LOC, and it has three border posts: Pokri, Kulari, Mangareta. And across the valley, if you will see, you will find the Pakistani side, which is PO. And in the Keren Valley, if you will go, you will find that A, it is difficult to get there, and B, people will tell you that only after the reiteration of the ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan in 2021, the village has attracted tourists and habitation. Because those who had their houses in that area, it was difficult for them to live there because of the constant firing across the village. So this is the situation over there in the Keren Valley. Now, when you see the humanitarian access, there are many affected areas where it is impossible for the humanitarian aid to reach. Human rights organizations are restricted, and the relief efforts are less. I'm not saying they are not, but they are less. I visited the Turtuk village in Ladakh, which is also another bordering village. Geographically, the village is in the Baltistan region, which has been under the Pakistani administration, except the 5 villages of the Turtuk block, which are part of India. Now, Turtuk lies in the region of Baltistan, a region almost completely controlled by the Pakistan. Turtuk is one of the 5 Balti populated village under Indian control. The other four being Bogdan, Tyakshi, Chalunka, and Gotang. Now in this area you will see that the what I'm trying to say is that please try and remember all these examples under the background of the dilemma which state is facing, or which even the scholars are facing to understand state security versus the human security dilemma. The development in this village is such that the entire village is suffering from the crisis of shortage of water, shortage of electricity, shortage of proper infrastructure for the livelihood. And the curses that they lie at the border region. Now, India-Pakistan border is definitely a complex and contentious issue, and it has significant implication for the regional security and human rights. Sustainable peace and stability in the region will require first addressing the historical grievance, second reducing the militarization, and then fostering the dialogue and cooperation between the two nations. All these exist in theory. What I recommend, what I see as a solution is a discussion and understanding the plight of people who are living across those border villages. And if that narrative will come out as a popular narrative, that will bring some change. Let's come to the second important border of South Asia, that is India-Bangladesh border. I will take 10 more minutes and then I will summarize. The India-Bangladesh border is another longest border. And we have seen that, again, just like the India-Pakistan, the border has seen crisis over the security and the economic activities are there, but human rights issues are also there. And you will see that there is a significant impact on the border communities, just like the India-Pakistan border. Here you will find that border fencing and security measures have disrupted the daily lives of the border communities. There are movements, but it is not completely the porous border. Displacement and livelihood issues are also there. You will find that Dwaki is a village. Dwaki is basically a area, not the village, which has one of the few roads for the border crossing between India and Bangladesh, and it is situated in Meghalaya. Recently, it has been explored by many travel bloggers. They have explored the place. All of them, if you listen to them, if you see their videos, if you talk to them, all of them have highlighted the crisis over the livelihood and over the infrastructure development. So that is something which we must address if we are looking at the border security from the humanitarian perspective. Now, trafficking and exploitation. India-Bangladesh border, historically famous for the human trafficking and exploitation. Now, the thousands of people who live across the border villages to the India-Bangladesh border, they mostly belong to the underprivileged socio-economic fabric of the society that are enticed to Indian capitals and towns annually by traffickers who promise them decent job but sell them into modern day slavery. And among these vulnerable people are stateless Rohingyas who are currently surviving in the camp areas of Bangladesh without any hope for return to Myanmar. Recently, the Indian investigation team busted a trafficking racket that exposed the displaced Rohingyas along the Bangladeshi girls, women being trafficked to the different parts of the world and India. The traffickers involved in this organized crime are associated with other accomplices who are operating from different corners of the two nations. So we can understand that how serious is the problem of trafficking in this particular border. There are many challenges to discuss, but India Bangladesh border requires an effective border management, which has to address the idea of balancing the security concerns with the rights and livelihood of the border communities. Bilateral cooperation in a more aggressive way is required with the improved infrastructure and stronger legal protection. Now, when we come to India Nepal border, I'll just take 2 more minutes. We see that there are also similar human rights issues. There is an impact on border communities. There are daily hearts which are available, but then with those daily hearts, no standardization of market is available. It is still being operated on the traditional lines. There is a requirement of digitalization to these daily hearts where the local vendors can register themselves and sell the products listed on a mutually agreed price. Otherwise, the exploitation in terms of what they produce and how that is being sold in the market will be continued. The problem of drug trafficking and human trafficking is another area. And addressing these challenges will require, again, a sustained diplomatic effort, effective border management, and cooperative mechanisms. To sum up, I would say that issues are many, challenges are many. But if we understand this in a proper framework and try to learn from the other regions, we'll be able to provide certain solutions along with certain critical insights to the entire region. And the borders in South Asia requires a nuanced approach of the conflict and the idea of insecurity emanating from history, emanating from the bilateral engagements among states. And that is how we'll be able to protect the rights and dignity of all the individuals in South Asia. And sustainable solutions should not be superimposed by the state. Rather, it should be worked out by the people, by the scholars of the region. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Uh, I'll open the floor for questions. Anybody having any question, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Tanisha Jain, and firstly, thank you so much for a great, insightful discussion. I would go ahead with my question. I wanted to ask that you discussed about this a bit, but I wanted to know more in detail. That how does the presence of security forces affect daily life for communities in border areas such as Kashmir and Arunachal Pradesh? Thank you so much.
If there are any other questions, I'll take all of them together and then I'll answer. I think Tanisha is the only one who has raised the question. It's a very good question, Tanisha. I must thank you for that. You must have heard about AFSPA, Armed Forces Special Power Act. And there have been multiple articles to understand the AFSPA and the people. There are many popular narratives which comes through the movies as well. There have been many movies like you must have seen Heather, you must have seen the Article 15, and there are also subsequent films which are now focusing on the AFSPA and the northeastern border and the Kashmir issue as well. These portrayals are not imaginary portrayals. I'm not saying AFSPA is not required in the region. Rather, we need to see the other side of the coin as well. It is an essential condition for the state because of the security concerns. But we also have to filter it to understand that what damage it is causing to the people. It is creating a sense of trauma. It is creating a memory, horror memory among the mind of the people who are living across in that area. I would request here in the panel, Chandra sir and Sood sir, to tell us about how this has been implemented. And I mean, there are many positives, but the way AFSPA has been implemented in these two particular areas which you have just asked, Arunachal and Kashmir, it has constructed a sense of insecurity to the people. Largely, it has helped the state, but subsequently, it has ruined the memory, ruined the connection of people to the state. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the insightful deliberations that you did. From whatever I could gather, I realized one thing that for people, often the borders have become more of an emotional baggage. And at the same time, the fact that you highlighted the thought about the act of AFSPA and how it has become a traumatizing experience to people of border, it just reminds me as to the conundrum that I often see, that these are also the acts where the government is trying to integrate these region with the process of developmental nationalism, say by building dams or something, to ensure that the development is reaching these areas. And at the same time, it's so interesting as to how we have never the what the community considers a border to be like, and also we never saw borders from the structuralist aspect. Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us that idea, and at the same time also that inspiration to look forward towards the structuralist aspect, and also look at the communities, how they consider border, instead of just understanding borders through the myopic lens of Westphalian concept of borders, or even for a moment of fact, even the status concept of borders. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your insights, and it was really great listening from you. Moving on to the last speaker of today, we have with us Mr. Vikas Chandra, Inspector General of BSF. Mr. Chandra has an extensive background in strategizing and managing border security during his service years. He he is a distinguished leader in national security and law enforcement with remarkable career spanning many years. Sir joined the Border Security Force in 1984 as an officer and quickly rose through many ranks, demonstrating his exceptional dedication and leadership. His outstanding service and commitment to excellence were recognized with President's Gold Medal and the prestigious Sword of Honor. Throughout his career, Mr. Chandra has been a recipient of numerous accolades, including the Police Medal for Meritorious Service and the President's Police Medal for Distinguished Service. Mr. Chandra's expertise extends beyond the national borders, having worked in international operational environments such as the Bosnia enriched by his foreign training, including the Higher Command course at the Center of Excellence Special Police Unit in Italy. His academic pursuits include participation in prestigious management programs at various institutions such as the MDI Gurugram, ITSA New Delhi, the Academy of Administration UP, etc. Mr. Chandra also commanded the Kashmir frontier as the Inspector General from 2015 to 16 and later served as the Inspector General Operations HR and Logistics Head at Command Headquarters Inspector Operations from 2017 to 18, focusing on anti-Naxal operations before retiring in 2018. Today, we are very fortunate to have him with us, and we are very much excited to understand and share his profound insights and vast experience with us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. If I am audible,
Yes, sir, you are audible.
firstly, I thank my co-panelists, Mr. Sood, Mr. Tripathi, and Dr. Vasali. They have thrown immense light on the issue involved. Let me first finish my talk, then obviously I will be answering your query raised and further queries, whatever will be raised in due course of time. In fact, the whole exercise is to convey the feeling that sovereignty, territoriality, borders, humanity has to coexist. In fact, in reality, nationalism, regionalism, globalization are all political thoughts for a smooth functioning of humanity in a systematic way of world order. Humanitarianism is the basic concept which political theorists try to justify in their own way. Government formation, establishing public order for a smooth 360-degree development of the society is what they aim for. Humanitarianism, in the mind of thinkers, activists, and all the critics, is to ensure political masters don't forget basic tenets of humanitarianism in order to emphasize the efficacy of their enterprise. Both are working in their own way to help humanitarianism evolve. Having said that, there are people in the society who have nothing to do with 360-degree development. Their sole aim is self-development. And to achieve their aim, they are ready to. In real sense, governments have no conflict with humanitarianism per se. Legally, things are made easy, and if there is some administrative issue to be resolved, it can be done locally or after government's intervention. However, when illegal process is enforced, conflict begins, and government forces to establish order resort to legal methods which appears to an outsider stakeholders as if both understand the other side views on the relevant issue or difficulty faced by either side, a common ground can be found. Well, at the moment, I am not the spokesperson of the government or the forces as such, but know from my experience that it is an established norm that both security and humanitarianism is the resources and nobody else. Both, the forces have to be responsible for security also, and at the same time, humanitarianism, whatever the issue coming out from it. In next few minutes, I'll discuss the border security challenges and ways and means to manage migrant crisis in border areas. In the humanitarian context, when we focus on border security challenges, the first factor comes into the play is the border population. Second factor is their mindset, how comfortable they are with the security arrangements available to them. As per the peacetime role and task of the border guarding forces is to create a sense of security amongst the border population. This is the first task. During peace, wartime role is different. Wherever we are, we have to create a sense of security amongst the border population. We have to take care of the border population. Second point is to check smuggling, and third point is to check transborder crime. All these two are related to the first point. Once we handle the other two, the first point is also amongst the border population, legitimate or otherwise, of the borders. Borders have many stakeholders. The fourth factor is stakeholders of the borders across. When we are on the border, we are dealing with our people also, we are dealing with other people also, as you have been saying. So they are also factors on the border. So we have to consider all these factors. The fifth factor is the existing local border economics, how local border economics is playing. So based on that, people are behaving in that area, and accordingly, security forces also have to manage their activities. As it has already been pointed out that the border guarding forces are the lead intelligence agencies and accordingly maintain an operating network. When we look at the stakeholders, we also come across a section of border population with illegal economic interest, having transnational interest and identities. I mean, those who have a stake there for economic reasons for this, I mean, they don't have any, national identities, and they work with impunity. So this is also, there. If we analyze these simple factors, most of the border security challenges, depending upon the specific area, will emerge. If we talk of the Indo-Myanmar border, we find lots of anti-national organizations getting safe sanctuary and are dealing in drugs and anti-national activities. Migration of Rohingyas, as was referred to Bangladesh and further to India, is certainly a matter of concern. When we talk of Indo-BD border, we find illegal migration taking place, cattle smuggling taking place, and depending upon the areas, other goods are also being smuggled. Illegal trade is an issue. Villagers going across the fence for cultivation or related activities in their land are treated with utmost respect and dignity, as this has been pointed out by Dr. Basali in her talks. They are treated with utmost respect and dignity. Indo-Nepal and Indo-Bhutan, as you said, that Indo-Nepal border has started showing some concern, but otherwise it has remained less problematic. Indo-Bhutan is less problematic. Indo-Pak borders, Rajasthan and Gujarat are prone to drug smuggling, but more or less forces remain on active defense mode. In Punjab, again, drug and arms menace is there and forces maintain an aggressive posture. However, villagers going across the fence for cultivation or related activities are treated with utmost respect and dignity. In Jammu till Lucknow, India refers the border as international border, but Pakistan refer it as working boundary. BSF and Rangers are placed on either side to defend the border, owing to the policies of J&K. And beyond Lucknow, we are associated with Army. We are assisting Army on LC from Bandipur to Kargil. Earlier, we were there till Kargil war had taken place. But after the Kargil war, we have been confined to up to Bandipur. I must say, when the Kargil war happened, BSF, wherever BSF was placed, no infiltration had taken place. Wherever BSF was there, on top of in Kargil area, No Pakistani infiltration or infiltrators had reached to that point, and BSF had protected the area excellently well. Uh, Again, maintaining very aggressive posture, armed infiltration, bat action, sniping, also ceasefire violations keeps taking place. By and large, the situation is under effective control of the forces. As regards how it impacts the civilian population, uh, the forces operate on one principle: by gaining the people, the kingdom is gained; by losing the people, the kingdom is lost. So the people are our concern. People are our concern. Mm, Later on, I will share you some pictures which I don't have at the moment, but I will show you. It was 2002, 22 years back, 2002. I was commanding a battalion there, and it was Independence Day. And a lot of children, I mean, I have got a lot of Indian flags from Delhi brought there and distributed the flags among children. They participated in the Independence Day parade. We called locals, when ladies, they came, they performed alongside activities. It was purely a kind of family affair on that day. It was absolutely in Srinagar, in Sora area. I'll share you with the pictures. We definitely believe that unless the people are happy with us, our presence has no meaning. And this is not only my feeling, this is the feeling of all Indians who are right thinking. They have the same feelings. The whole army is, doing the same thing. The whole BSF is doing the same thing. Yes, some mindset problems are there. Some people are there who create kind of conditions where, you have to resort to some kind of forced measures, but that is temporary in nature and not permanent. Moving further, managing migration crisis. When I am talking of managing migration crisis, migration as a phenomenon has been taking place from pre-independence days, as has been highlighted already. Bangladesh was part of India pre-independence, and Kolkata was the business center. East Bengal, as it was politically known, constituted agrarian population, and for various regions, population were drawn towards Kolkata for work and better life prospects. So it is happening right from pre-independence days. Independence movement brought aspirations, but at the same time, at the time of independence, it also brought distress in various communities due to communal divide. And sooner the Red Cliff line was announced, a population shift has taken place. Muslims from Bihar, Bengal, and other places had moved to East Pakistan, and Hindus had moved to India and were accommodated in various parts of India. So a population shift had taken place then. Afterwards, whenever there has been a communal situation in East Pakistan, Hindus were pushed to move, and they kept on migrating towards India. Even Muslims were moving towards northeast as a labor force, and labor in agrarian fields later started settling down. So if you study, a base was already available inside India as a pull factor with success stories for others whenever there was a need to migrate from various economic or other regions, call it push factor. The migration has been taking place. Initially, these migrants managed to cross over and settle down close to borders so that in the event of return, it was easy. It also suited them culturally, being in same cultural environment. So this was another base developing for them. Also, the increased presence of migrants forced many elites of the area to shift upwards, disposing their land and properties. 1971 Indo-Pak War also caused major population shift. from then East Pakistan to India. This population shift was in the form of refugees, and everyone acknowledged and accepts there was no control, and government of the day provided them camp and shelter. After the war, not everyone went back. India's economic growth and construction industry needed cheap labor. So, in the hindsight, we know that the cartels were created for a smooth shifting of the cheap labor from now Bangladesh to India. The lady migrants were housemaids available at nominal charges throughout Indian cities. Based on the theory of supply and demand, the population movement had been taking place. The Indian public transport system has been a boon for them right from the crossing point onwards. The vote politics in India brought their forefront as a threat or crisis and started affecting the electoral results based on polarization or otherwise. The biases started from Assam and spread all over. The subsequent exercise of deportation and pushbacks, politics of denial by Bangladesh, and subsequent Indian action in the form of fencing, more deployment as a measure to control the phenomenon began. It also affected various state administration as jails were full of illegal migrants and Bangladesh government was in denial mode to accept them back. In this backdrop, the phenomenon of illegal migration and their effect has to be viewed. Coming to managing the crisis, the fact need to be acknowledged that mass migrations has taken place in the past and will continue till push and pull factors are there to support migration, albeit under strain. Adjusting mechanism is in place to check their illegal migration by way of intercepting them on borders, detaining them, and by invoking a safe and dignified return of illegal migrants on completion of their jail term. At the diplomatic level, issue has been constantly raised to elicit cooperation whenever need arises. Border infrastructure has been constantly upgraded for effective surveillance to reduce illegal crossings. On the Indian side, we are extending vocational training to develop skills of borderlanders so that they involve themselves in legal economic activities. Border guarding forces under BADP plans support them if they want to undertake a skill-related small-size business. Many humanitarian organizations remain in touch with forces to lend a helping hand at time of needs and keep informing and educating their concern of behavioral shifts. While dealing with illegal migrants, BSF follow legal procedure. In case of women and children, special care is taken to identify whether they are victims of trafficking and deal them accordingly. Presence of female border guards matters a lot. Constantly training our forces to respect the human rights of the detainees and that their dignity is maintained is of utmost importance to us. So I patiently and I am open to questions.
I request the participants to kindly ask questions. Please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your insightful speech. And you just addressed how the crisis is being managed through borderlanders. Uh, but I would like to know how do detention centers in India, especially those in Assam, handle undocumented migrants and suspected illegal immigrants? Also, what specific challenges do vulnerable groups such as Rohingyas face in these detention facilities?
I have not kept a focus on that. So I will request Mr. Sood to take on this question. detention center, I have not, kept in my mm, thoughts. It has, I retired in 18. This all detention center has come somewhere thereafter.
बेटा आवाज कम करो परी Tisha, what was your question again?
Sir, I would like to know how detention centers in India, such as those in Assam, handle undocumented migrants and suspected illegal immigrants. What?
You see, insofar as BSF is concerned, we haven't had any direct role to play in these detention centers. These are run by the state governments, uh, and the detention centers house those people who have not been able to produce their document. I firstly think that presently they are uh, existing only in the state of Assam, where the NRC has been done in the past. So I'm actually not aware of the mechanism that happens in these detention centers, because we are not directly giving them. We, when apprehend illegal migrants, we hand them over to police, and further disposal is done by police and the other agencies of the state government. So I won't really be able to comment on this aspect.
Thank you, Sood sir. Thank you, Chandra sir, as well for your enlightening words. And at the same time, I would now like to request if there's any further questions, please we can take it up now for any of the speakers. Okay, so since we do not have any further questions, I would like to thank. Is there any other question? So I would like to thank Mr. Chandra for your enlightening speech, which has not just covered about the humanity perspective, specifically as to how forces are deployed, with specific consideration to the human locals around it, and the fact that the forces in itself is not the enemy until and unless there is some kind of illegal activities that is taking place. Again, coming from Assam, I'm part which is being imposed here, and how we are so anxious about this, to that of how we are very anxious. And at the same time, the very fact that I would also like to thank as to how you have mentioned this thing as to how migration is not something which is new, but it has been something which has been in the past, and it has been a continuing phenomena till date. And that is where again our anxieties have been started, and that is something I really hope that in future we all can work on. Thank you so much, sir, for your work in BSF, because of which again our borders have been secured. Thank you once again for our speakers for the day, and I would like to hand it over to Tanisha, who's going to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Rudrani. So, good afternoon, everyone, again. It has been an honor to be part of this fantastic and insightful online seminar. On behalf of the entire Borderman team, I'm delighted to be here, and I would like to take this moment to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed guests, Mr. S.K. Sood sir, Mr. Dhananjay Tripathi sir, Dr. Vaishali Raghuvanshi ma'am, and Mr. Vikash Chandra sir for accepting our invitation and joining us today. The discussion on human rights implication in border security policies was thought-provoking and crucial. Your time and topic to light. This session has undoubtedly helped us obtain a better grasp of not only the challenges faced in achieving border security, but also upholding